We move into the next leaders' chat on the topic technology helping in reigniting the water cooler conversations. Now, water cooler talks, as all of you know, are unscripted, they're a lot of fun and casual. But with remote working becoming the new norm, it took a little bit of a backseat. Thanks to intervention from leaders in technology coming into play, the water cooler conversations got redesigned virtually, creating a strong network of connected co-workers and enabling the community in a new way. Our speakers for this session, and all of them will be joining us remotely as well, is Piyush Mehta, Chief Human Resource Officer, Genpact; Sukanya P, Senior Vice President, Tech Area Lead, Group Digital and Technology, Swiss Re; and moderating the session, we have with us Geeta, Gurnani, Country Head, Modern Work, Microsoft India. Geeta is passionate about leveraging technology to solve business and social problems. Geeta comes with a 22-plus year of experience in the industry, currently serving as Country Head for Modern Work Business for Microsoft India, which includes the productivity and employee experience platforms, Microsoft Office, Windows, Enterprise Mobility, Teams, and Microsoft Viva. It's a pleasure to have all of them join us virtually. Please put your hands together as we invite them to this summit. And over to you, Geeta.
Thank you, Justin, for inviting us for this wonderful conversation. And I hope you've been enjoying your day throughout because future of work is, I think all of us are anxious about and are looking forward that how it's going to shape up. You heard about workplaces, very, very important because people are questioning that is it worth commuting back to office and why should I come to office? So I think onus is on leaders and us to see that how are we making workplaces for employees to return back to the work, right? And here we are today to talk about that when you return to workplace or if you work hybrid, there is an element of social capital, that how do you really build the social capital and how do you really leverage technology in bringing those social capital back, bringing those water cooler conversations back, which were very, very normal when we were working the pre-COVID era. That's what I call it, that we are now in a post-COVID era and there was a pre-COVID era. I am your host today, Geeta. I lead the modern work business for Microsoft India, which essentially mean that how do we use technology to bring productivity, bring employee experience, and bring the future of work live for and real for our employees. I'm joined by two of my co-panelist leaders in their own spaces. But before taking further time, I would like to invite both of them to do a little bit self-introduction. So, Sukanya, why don't we start with you?
Thank you. I'm sure it's going to be a pleasure connecting with you and Piyush to have this conversation. I am currently the tech area lead for the global HR solutions in Swiss Re. And before joining Swiss Re, I was working in a technology product firm where we were building, in-shore tech solutions. So I essentially come from the tech background. And I also want to introduce myself as a mental health first aider, where I take time. We work together with the teams to incorporate mental well-being at our workplace.
Thanks, Sukanya. That's wonderful. And I think mental well-being is one area which has surfaced really, really high in the entire pandemic time, and everybody has become more aware around this area. And I think it's a very important area to dwell into. With that, Piyush, over to you if you can help us with your introduction.
Thank you, Geeta, and wonderful to be on with you and with Sukanya. So, looking forward to an interesting discussion. I work with human resources at Genpact. I've been with Genpact for the last 21 years, so kind of part of the furniture, and I really love it here. I worked with Unilever and PepsiCo before I came to Genpact, and have been in human resources through my career.
Thanks, Piyush, and thanks for the lovely introduction. So, audience, I'm sure that we are looking forward to hear from these two leaders who are with us here today. So, why don't we dive straight into the conversation? So, I'll just start with my first question to you, Piyush, and to you, Sukanya, both, which is Work friendships are among the most rewarding relationship people make according to a recent research, which was actually quite an eye opener for me as well, that how we look at the work friendship. So what are your views around social capital at work and impact it might have on individuals and organizations? Piyush, why don't we start with you on that?
Sure. So, you are 100% right. I mean, it's a realization, at least for us, that hit us big time with the events of the last couple of years. And the way we think about this now is somewhat like, an organization works like the human brain. So our brain is able to create and adapt because large quantities of neurons can connect, directly, indirectly to distant parts of the neural network. And that is what we believe gives us diversity of thinking as individuals. Similarly, think about an organization. The view is that people are able to perform better, they're able to build trust, they're able to feel safe, they're able to feel included, and bring their best selves to work through either intentional or incidental, accidental interactions with colleagues that you may build either strong ties with or weak ties with. Now, the difference between the strong ties and the weak ties is really critical. Okay, strong ties are, connections that are strong, typically that, people we are comfortable with, people we know well, interact with regularly. Um, they are important to shape our opinion and guide our actions. But the challenge sometimes with that is that it can lead to homogeneous thought processes, right? The same type of thinking, because these are people we have a natural affinity to and therefore we feel comfortable with. Weak ties connect people with others who are further from them and can bring a lot more of fresh perspective. Yeah. So the key is to be able to listen attentively and therefore, use that as a prompt. And therefore, when you think about the context of social capital as weak ties and strong ties, and then think about the transition to remote working, formal collaboration continued through Teams, through Zoom. It was apparent that chance meetings that would happen on the office floor would not happen through formal virtual meetings, right? And therefore, developing collaborative relationships, enhancing your network, all of that, which energizes thinking, all of that needs to be orchestrated if you want to think about this at scale across large organizations. And therefore, the work from home concept, if not supported with these efforts to build weak ties, in our view, can lead to a loss of innovation and a loss of culture that would otherwise have happened.
Fantastic, Piyush. I think I really love this weak ties and the strong ties. And I think great learning that weak ties actually bring diverse point of views because that's what it entails to that you get into serendipity of acquiring some knowledge which you otherwise would have not.
Absolutely.
Fa-
Absolutely.
Fantastic, Piyush. Sukanya, I would love to hear your views as well on this.
No, I think great views, Piyush. I think I would just build on that, right? And uh, I think social capital is one topic for which we don't need a business case, right? Unlike most other topics, because it's very clear now that organizations can only thrive, learn, and grow if the employees are open, they're transparent, and they're trusting each other. And also, it's a great retention tool for organizations when people connect at the personal level, right? And again, if you look at it from an employee perspective, it creates a sense of belonging and being part of the organization as a whole. It brings in more a sense of purpose when we actually build, deep relationships at workplace. So, in my opinion, I think it's a no-brainer.
Great. Thanks, Sukanya. And I loved your part around business case because I was recently working with one of the customer where we discussed that when it comes to employee experience, when it comes to social experience part of it, it is actually return on experience versus return on investment. So we devised this new term ROX versus ROI because it's very hard to justify a pure ROI, but it has lot more influence on the productivity, on the affinity as the employees build toward the organization. So great to hear views from both of you. And since Sukanya, you emphasized on the importance and the business case part of it, so how you at your organization are really using the technology to improve the innovation and collaboration, which otherwise would start to miss out if we are continue to work in the hybrid environment, which seems to be the case. So, what innovations and what technology interventions are you seeing at your workplace?
Thanks for that, Geeta. I think when we talk about technology, right, often people think of deep tech, the AI ML styles or the AR VR concepts. But what we realized was it's the basic tools that are available with everybody, which can actually lead to grassroots level innovations. And I can give you two examples from my organization. First one, right? The reason we collaborate or the ways we collaborate around the water cooler, one could be something related to professional needs, another could be a personal interest, right? With regards to professional needs, we often discuss about what problem statements we have, who else has similar problems, who can actually provide solutions for it. So, what we devised was a very basic framework, a simple Kanban board where people can actually go put their problem statements. And anybody who has the bandwidth and who has the interest can pick up these topics, assign it to himself or herself, start working on it. And they can collaborate with each other, try to ask more questions, and devise simple solutions for each other, right? And here, the advantage is also that if I'm, say, a Java developer, but if I'm building a small tool for you to kind of co create it, I can actually use Python. I can learn something also with it. And we also made sure, we kept governance to the minimum. We don't want to, watch over anybody's shoulders to see who's doing what. Just making sure, there are not mission critical data or personal sensitive data around that's being discussed. So that's one way we said, hey, professionally we can come together and collaborate and co-create and solve problems. And at a personal level, again, what we realized during a virtual water cooler discussion was that a lot of people that were employed in the organization during the pandemic were returning to Bangalore or were actually coming to Bangalore for the first time. And they had no idea what are the places around, what are the eateries, what are the hangouts, art and cultural places. So one of my colleagues just went about and created this small power app. And mind you, it's not a big tech, right? It's just a power app which had a list of places that you can visit, eateries. You can go trekking to this place, or you can, find art here and things like that. And everybody started uh, contributing towards this tool, adding their own favorite places. And then we launched it in our SharePoint, location SharePoint. Just to tell you, this became a super hit that some of our international travelers started looking at it and said, hey, can you add Google Map link to this? And somebody else said, hey, can I, make this as a travel buddies where I can fill in, my preferred travel location and date and others can join in. So, what? The idea is hybrid has actually accelerated the pace at which technology can lead to such micro innovations.
I love the word micro innovation, Sukanya, because I think you have emphasized in your conversation a couple of times that it doesn't need to be really big bang and real transformative innovations only. Of course, that is needed, but I think these micro innovations led by individual employees can make a lot more difference in creating these engaging platforms. So that's super helpful. Piyush, just your views. Genpact is like a multi-geography and a very big organization. So how are you leveraging technology to innovate and to provide right intervention for collaboration and social capital?
Okay, so let me jump straight into a specific example. In 2021, we developed what we believe is the first matchmaking bought in the corporate environment, so the water cooler. And the objective was to pair people up frictionlessly for 15 minutes using some reasonably advanced data science. Okay. It encouraged people to have casual but meaningful conversations. So these were not formal work type conversations. And what we supported it with was, recommendations for what a typical icebreaker can be, etc., etc. So what we are trying to do with these water cooler conversations is replicate those fleeting, like you said, serendipitous friendly conversations and connections that happened at office but are more difficult to foster when you're working from home. Yeah. So it basically recreates the bumping into someone at work phenomena. Yeah. And then strengthens connections by building those relationships. Now, as when I talked about those weak ties earlier, the entire focus of this was weak ties because those are the ones that dwindle in the new work environment. Yeah. And we know that we believe at least that they are crucial to organizational and personal success. Uh, a little bit about the app. It was integrated with the entire Microsoft 365 suite. So using and adoption became really simple. So, the way it works is it uses organization network analysis to pair people who have informal or infrequent ties with each other. Yeah. And it automatically schedules that time on their calendar based on a mutually convenient, space. So the whole effort is about making it a great experience to engage in these virtual water cooler conversations. We've had terrific feedback. So within 6 months, we've had over 30,000 meetings that have been scheduled. And more than 53% of our employees have had more than 10 water cooler chats. Yeah. So we are quite delighted with the way this is working. We filed a patent, and you would probably know this. Microsoft considers it one of the more innovative use of their organizational analytics products. So sorry, I sort of jumped in with a view on Microsoft as well.
Thanks, Piyush. And guys who are listening to us, this was not staged. This is a real innovation, and we just wanted to bring it live for everybody because, in my view, also, Piyush, I think this is one of the most wonderful use case of technology I have seen, that how it can create these all boundaryless social capital where people are not getting only into the formal chats, as you said, and lose out on those informal conversation which add a lot of value to individuals, which add a lot of value to the organization. So absolutely fantastic. And I'm also reminded of initially pandemic when hit us. One of our engineer also created a very small water cooler app. Of course, it wasn't to the level what Genpact has done. And he, through that app, actually, one of the engineer got a meeting with Satya. Okay. And that guy was like super happy and energized that he got to have a water cooler conversation with Satya for about 10 minutes. So, absolutely. And you can imagine what kind of an impact it would have led to the individuals. So, fantastic. And audience, I'm sure as you're listening to this conversation, probably it will be great to hear your views as well. That as you think about social capital, how do you thinking about leveraging technology? Because see, technology can actually then, as I said, it makes you boundary less, that you don't have to be co-located at one place, which was the case with water cooler earlier. Now you can actually have water cooler conversation across the boundaries, across the geographies. uh, now, since we spoke about the example I was talking about, that how Satya got into and bumped into with one of the engineer on the water cooler part, just want to hear your views. We start with you, Sukanya, which is in terms of that. What's the role you see leadership in sustaining the water cooler conversations? Because it's important. So it will be great to hear that how leaders should model their behavior and encourage these water cooler conversations. So, Sukanya, why don't you share your thoughts around this?
And that's a great example that of Satya coming into the conversation, right? And um, I think the role of leader is not just an enabler, but it's more to nurture these water cooler conversations, right? These informal discussions. I can again give you an example from what we had. So during the pandemic, we realized people were going through a lot of difficult times. So we kind of opened a platform for connecting people. So it was just a safe space for them to come in, come together, talk about whatever was bothering them, right? COVID or otherwise. And we also ran a campaign. We really called it a campaign. It was the hashtag It's Okay campaign for psychological safety. So we used Yama channels to post nuggets where people would say, hey, it's okay to do this and that, right? From their own personal experiences. We created teams backgrounds to make it popular and then, comic strips and things like that. But the challenge was people were asking us, hey, you're saying it's okay to say no when I'm overloaded, but are my leaders really okay? Right? So then we thought about it. We brought all the leaders from the location into these virtual talk sessions. So when the leaders themselves came into these meetings where they could showcase leadership vulnerability, they could talk about, how do they normalize self-care and well-being. And they also spoke about, highlighting the sustainable pace of work and setting healthy boundaries for themselves. Then this became a lot more relatable to people. We also took video clips of, international leaders, posted those in the Yama channels. So when somebody just said, initially I used to be very scared when people came into the video call. But then I realized it's not that, you know, they have come into my workspace, but I have rather invaded their homes. And it's okay for children to pop into your video calls at times. So this made a huge impact. And I think this active intervention from the leadership team and highlighting their own personal stories, it actually helped create a psychologically safe workplace for us. And people were able to bring in their authentic self to work. And it also kind of humanized the workspace a lot more, I should say, tech or otherwise, right?
True. Very well said, Sukanya. And I think you touched a very important aspect of psychological safety. I think it's very, very critical now from a employee's perspective that they feel safe from a organization perspective. Piyush, any thoughts you would like to share with us around role of leadership?
Very, very similar to what Sukanya said. I completely agree with this whole thing about leaders establishing empathy, leaders establishing genuine conversations. It's about, sharing vulnerabilities and in an environment where, the entire world was challenged like never before over the last 2 years. The power of just sharing that humanness with each of our colleagues is a very empowering and a hugely motivating experience, I think, across the organization. So, you know, just the ability of leaders to be present and to bring their genuine selves to these interactions is hugely powerful. And to be able to set the example, Sukanya talked about people jumping into a video frame, kids jumping in, pets jumping in, all of that stuff, which without being said in so many words, earlier was a no-no, just became fantastic. Again, I'm going to use the word serendipitous experiences. Very powerful and created a very different bond, between teams. So I just think being examples of that every day with our genuine selves is hugely important for all leaders to establish, and it can't just be left to chance interactions. It has to be, if you have to do this at scale, and for us, think about 100,000 organization, 100,000 people plus. It needs to be orchestrated in a way that can be replicated across the world for us.
Fantastic. So I think very interesting conversation. Why social capital important? Why the technology really critical? And then role of leadership. Just last parting question to both of you that we all know that everybody had very different experiences in last 24 months because the lives have changed for everyone, but in some form and shape it was different for everybody because everybody was operating in different circumstances. So quickly, Piyush, from with you and Sukanya, what is your one personal and professional takeaway in last 24 months, which you believe has shifted your thinking? So, Piyush, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, sure. So look, for me, I've always believed in the present being hugely important, disproportionately to anything else. But I think what the pandemic and the events of the last 2 years has brought home is even more how that is critical. The present, the here, and the now is hugely important, and everything else pales in significance. And in that context, I think I consider myself even more fortunate than I did earlier to be doing what I'm doing and to be happy doing that. So for me, that's a continued personal discovery. On the professional front, like I said, the power of these informal interactions, the power of the weak ties in enhancing innovation and in building culture of the organization is hugely critical. It has been dramatically reinforced, and the pace at which technology is being adopted by organizations, including ourselves, is heartening to see. But if I step back, it is once again about having the conceptual thought right and technology being an enhancer of that.
Fantastic, Piyush. Sukanya, what's your takeaway?
Quickly, right? For me, I think what I realized is human life and relationships are far more important than what we thought were important pre-pandemic, like our professional success or college degrees. So it brought that reflection back. Um, and professionally, if you ask me, I think as an organization and also as a person, I've realized that it's important that we look at talent strategy and not as footprint strategy anymore. With gig economy and a lot of things changing about workplace, we definitely need to reinvent ourselves. That was a big professional takeaway, I would say.
Fantastic. I think both of you wonderful. I think wonderful thoughts. I really enjoyed this conversation because a lot of learnings for me. I think few words which will stay with me is the weak links and the psychological safety part of it, and footprint versus the talent strategy part of it, and I think the power of informal conversations, what we spoke about. So I think with that, we are at the end of our session where we actually got some real great insights around that how people think about social capital and how organizations are adopting technology to really accelerate the social capital and the informal water cooler conversations. With that, I will open up for the question and answer for the audience, and please raise your hands and let us know if you have any questions. Happy to answer that. Thank you so much and enjoy rest of the conference.
Thank you, Sukanya. Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, if any of you have any questions, you can just put your hand up. We'll make sure a mic reaches you. There's only one small thing that you'll need to do. You'll have to just face the camera so she can see you as well.
Hello. Thank you for this wonderful session, Geeta. And my question is primarily on, currently we're talking about the water cooler conversations and is really building amazing interactions. That's what I'm hearing from what you said. What next? I mean, what are we going to be doing next? So always there is a next to whatever we do. So from here, where are we going now? And the follow-up question for that would be, are we building in a micro biases in our water cooler conversations? What are your thoughts? Thank you.
So probably just a follow-up clarification. When you say micro biases, what do you really mean by that? And then I'll answer what next also.
I mean, when I get to meet with any of the leaders, so
Yeah.
what I learn from them is different. The way I'm going to communicate that to my entire world is going to be different. That is what I mean.
Yeah, so I'll answer that when you say that what next. I think we're still even adopting the whole water cooler and technology intervention, I would say, because I think water cooler conversations were happening since ages. It is not new. But what we are seeing is that how do we enable in the hybrid world? So for that, I think, of course, what stays is the technology intervention and trying to make it real. I think there are some very initial pilots, like you heard from Sukanya, you heard from Piyush, but we are yet not there. I think we have a lot more to do to feel the employees more engaged and give them the kind of environment they are used to from a water cooler perspective. And I think the micro bias is part of it. I would say, see, in my mind, water cooler is always an informal learning which people go through, or the informal knowledge which they capture as they get into the conversation, because they are not really conversations which are very structured or with a specific agenda. So, of course, I think those are the learnings which will be very specific and tuned to the individuals. And in that sense, I think everybody will have their own interpretation. So, I think the biases as they existed in the physical world will continue to exist in the technology world. What next? I think in the future of work, we are all talking about metaverse, and that's going to be the future of work. And I think metaverse will play a lot more important role in terms of as people learn in the hybrid environments, as people interact in the hybrid environment, because there is a specific need in few use cases where metaverse will be really helpful. And we are even seeing that people are having fatigue with a lot of videos on, so they want to make it more natural through the metaverse involvement. So, in my mind, in the future of work, metaverse is going to be the next big thing, and we'll gradually see the inclusion of that in our work environment.
Hi, Geeta. I love the perspectives and insights that you shared through Virtual Connects and a lot about it. My question is, do you think trust can be created better through Virtual Connects than through in-person meetings?
I think trust, I would say it's more to do with, I think, how individuals connect in the conversation, whether it's virtual or physical. And I think it needs to happen over a period, right? Over multiple conversations is when people build the trust. Now, there is an element, I think, which gets missed when we are virtual, which is the unsaid, right? Unsaid communication or non-verbal communication, which we usually observe when we are in physical world. We are observing the body language of the people, where probably we start to build the trust better. I think it's totally my personal opinion that trust will take a longer time in the virtual world versus the physical world, because we will completely miss on the non-verbal communication. But yes, trust can be built over multiple conversations. Duration would be slightly longer in the virtual world, is my personal belief, and that's my personal view.
Thank you so much for that.
All right, if there are no more questions, we'd like to thank Geeta for staying on with us this long. Thank you so much, Geeta, for being here with us. We'd also like to thank Piyush and Sukanya for that interesting conversation. Request you all to please give them a big round of applause.